Hey, it says I'm live. I am a minute early and I am getting myself set all the way up, folks. Um, Waiting for people to jump in, getting my notifications so I am on. I am checking so much right now. What the hell? We're looking good. We're looking good. All right. One more thing. Let's see. There we are. All right. All right. Hello, 2026. Jesus. Hi, everyone. I have been away for a while from lives. I was even hesitant to jump in tonight, but I promised it. I kind of put a challenge to myself, just fixing the screen a bit so we can we can see that I'm on brand. And yeah, share this with people. Let them jump on in. Make sure they're here. Good night. Good night. And tonight is going to be the first live, but I am going to do better this year. It's not a resolution, it's a legit something that I am going to work on. Since the last live, I didn't even look back at the last live. Reading glasses are now a fixture. So this is the life I'm living. And 5 people so far. I'm excited. Um, I'm going to forward this to a couple of people now to make sure that they're on. And what else? What else? What else? What else? I'm just going to be talking about what I do best, compliance. All right. For the persons who are on, thank you for joining on time. I'm sure people will jump in. I am doing my best to make sure that this is something that persons can get some value from, still sending a few more forwards. Should send it to the people I'm related to, right? There we go. Right. So, all right, here we go. All right, so tonight's live is going to focus on compliance career, and it's also a special announcement. And so, from the last few lives that I did, I was focused on a number of things: tokenization and making sure that people kind of understood AI, that they had a good sense of certain compliance issues. And from that vantage point, I personally felt like I was doing what I needed to do. But sometimes you get a stare based on what is happening in relation to things on the ground, like legit things on the ground. And so it's been an interesting few months. And what I will say to you is that me being here, I feel is a testament to a lot of the discussions that I've had, particularly in the last 6 months. I can tell you personally, I am happy to be on the other side of 2025. It was definitely a year of transformations for me, and in it was transformative for so many facets of my life. I'm still getting used to the reading glasses, deeply transformational. And I can safely say that I am not the same person I was this time in 2025. I can also say that it is an amazing thing to be a completely transformed person. But I am a Scorpio, and that Phoenix thing is an actual legit something. Now, before I dive into the discussion today, there is something that I want to actually acknowledge. I'm extremely grateful for the 2,466 subscribers. I haven't been that consistent for the last few months of 2025. And I still saw positive subscriptions coming in. And I just felt the love and I loved it. And people were like, when you get back, we're going to be here. And that was one of the things that was so heartwarming for me. So it definitely was one of the other things that gave me, a bit of a push. I was working on getting a little more exposure on LinkedIn, but I definitely cannot forget the origin story of YouTube. So if you're here, share the link. I'm wanting to say the live won't be a long one, but the last time I said that and it was meant for 20 minutes, I ended up here for an hour. So let's see how it goes. And around this point in time, I would give a disclaimer. But before I do that, if anybody is wanting to say where they're tuning in from, please do say so. If you're the shy type, you can remain a bit anonymous, but good night from the beautiful British Virgin Islands. With my eye, I feel like I am actually going to need to get my eyes checked because what I'm seeing on the screen is a little bit blurry. I look a little bit blurry, so I could only imagine. I'm like, okay, the reading glasses are a thing. It might have to be like legit real glasses, but come on in, share the link. And so what I'll do is get into the disclaimer so I can move on to the point of discussion. And so the disclaimer is this. Around now, so in lives prior to June 2025, I gave a disclaimer about my views not representing those of a regulatory body. I retired at the end of June of last year, but regulators still have, even if you're retired, still have to give the disclaimer because there are things that we are sworn to secrecy, so confidentiality, and we have to maintain that for the rest of our lives. So the disclaimer hasn't changed much. So the content I present tonight are my views. It's for entertainment purposes only. I have to say that part for YouTube. And it does not represent the views of any regulatory body or standard setter. And this live is also for entertainment purposes and is not construed as financial advice or investment advice. For those that are joining live and those that come in after the live, and you're new to my channel, my name is Simone Martin, and I am a lot of things. I worked as a regulator for close to 24 years, and prior to that, I worked as an auditor for 3 years. Now, as a retired non-conventional regulator, but an approachable professional, it is from I think what I would consider a depth of amazing experiences in my career that has allowed me to engage with compliance professionals from around the world and technologists. I'm also very, the IT space and the fintech space. That makes me a unique person in what I've been drawn to do. It makes me uniquely equipped, but some of you may not be aware, some of you may be. I've been a teacher from as far back as 2003. I was adjunct faculty at the local community college here in the BVI. I also facilitated ICA classes, ICSA classes, which is now the Chartered Governance Institute. I've guest lectured. I can say this now that I'm retired. I've guest lectured at a few universities, including University of Miami Law, University of Tennessee, and one in the UK that might be a little familiar, which is Cambridge. And so those are, I think, amazing experiences. But in all of that time, I've always reached out to help others and to offer my views. I've had a lot of people reach out, but the passion for compliance was still lit. Even though last year was really intense, it was still lit. And I still get very fired up about so many different compliance issues. If you didn't know, I also published my first book in late 2024, 10 Tips to Help Compliance Officers Soar. And I think the link is in the description, but if not, it is on Amazon. And the Compliance Officers Planner is back. It's fully digital this year. So it's not too late to get yours for 2026. And that link is definitely in the description. Now, on to the topic for today, your future career in compliance. Um, if again, for those that are joining in, I see the numbers are going up. Make sure you say where you're from. You can say where you're from or where you're viewing from or whether you're here for compliance or not. So over the last few years, persons have asked me for my advice on how to get into a career in compliance. And there have been persons who have, said, hey, my kid is graduating from high school or from college and they're interested in a job. What do I do? And how do they start? How do they get a job? What job should they be looking for? And it's a number of things. And from that vantage point, I recognize that it's not always an easy thing for persons to figure out. And some do get their foot in the door, but some unfortunately do not. What has kind of surprised me is that that discussion point has actually expanded so much after I retired. Persons have been curious about the field and would ask questions about it and keep hearing about it. I would get calls from compliance curious is what I call them, and that's from a number of different countries. So these are people who may be in a financial institution or DNFBP, so designated non-financial business or profession, or an NPO, nonprofit organization, who they may be doing something else like finance, but they keep hearing about compliance and they want to pivot in. Now, there are some others who are they've gotten their feet in the door, but they want to climb the compliance ladder. And, people are have healthy ambitions and they don't necessarily want to sit at the bottom rung. They think what it takes to become a chief compliance officer, chief risk officer. And unlike many other fields, compliance hasn't been around that long, so there's no roadmap per se. Then one of the troubling things that I've seen is that there is a bit of gatekeeping that still goes on in a lot of professions, but definitely compliance. And what do I mean by gatekeeping? That means that there are persons who channel their people into certain roles, and it happens everywhere. But to me, that's scary for compliance. Compliance is a field that has more than enough work to go around, but it's also a field that's better covered by persons who actually have a passion for it. So putting, it's not and not to discount the role of a secretary or administrator, but it is such a dynamic field that this is not something that once a person learns to do X, they can set it and forget it. This is not that field. And so because of how dynamic it is, it needs someone who is a continual learner, someone who is nimble, someone who has critical thinking skills. And so it's not a field for one that hoards information, especially because the trends, the risks, the issues change all the time. So tonight I am going to cover 3 things for anyone thinking about a career in compliance and what they should consider. But I'm also going to cover 3 things for persons already on the ground floor of a compliance career and what you should consider to help you move up. Now, last year I did a live that sounds very familiar to this topic, and I can tell you that it is this different content altogether. So now let's start first with those who are wanting to pivot their career. You may be working somewhere else. You may be working in an organization that has a compliance function, but you're not in that function and you're looking to get a job in compliance. Then let's focus on what you will need to do, at least 3 of the things, and how you can get there. So first, fix your resume. And you might be saying, well, Simone, I'm already in an organization, why would I need to fix my resume? Sometimes your resume is set out in a manner that doesn't help you. You may be going at it from the general administrator role or whatever role you're in, and not necessarily highlighting skills that lend themselves to compliance. So, what type of skills are those that you might be able to amass? You might be able to amass skills of data analytics, right? You might be able to amass skills of auditing. You might be able to look at how the law is applied, so legal research. You might be able to apply investigative work. Are you seeing or risk analysis? That is a big one. And risk analysis is something that I've written on and taught and developed documents for. And with risk analysis, some people think that is very cookie cutter, plain vanilla. Oh, sweet summer children. No, 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 no. But risk analysis is something that is more intuitive than people realize. So you might be going through files at work and aggregating information from those files. So sorting out like business activities and noticing, well, hey, we are getting more business from this particular sector than another. That is data analytics. And so your resume, you might be doing the things that lend themselves to compliance, work in compliance, but your resume may not be reflecting that. So you need to fix your resume. And one of the other points that I would make is that shared with the first managing director of the commission. He used to say to me, "You get what you negotiate." And a lot of people will sit in jobs and not necessarily make sure that they build themselves up, or they build themselves up, but they don't seek out the discussion. Seek out the discussion. Make sure you ask the questions. And if it is that you're in a firm and that firm is not willing to give you an opportunity to have a meaningful discussion, it may be time to go someplace else. And that is often the case when you have somebody who's a workhorse in a particular area. And it has happened to me that I was in a particular area, interested in moving to another area, and for whatever reason, your supervisor is like, well, what am I going to do when I lose this workhorse? The supervisor needs to think differently, because you should never stymie somebody, one. Two, the person needs to be able to share that information. And three, I find that when people are appreciated and valued for what they do, that you tend to have more loyalty within the firm and the skills still transcend. So if it is that you're the workhorse and they're not recognizing your value, it may be time to exit and look for someone else who is willing to recognize your value. So that's the first one. Fix up your resume / negotiate. And that's for if you are in a job that has a compliance function. And if you're not in a job where the compliance function is, so you're looking for a job, fixing up your resume is going to be very critical to make sure that it's reflecting what you want to put forward for a job. You might have applied for jobs and nobody's answered back because your resume is, as the kids would say, your resume is trash. So take some time to look at what your resume is presenting you as. For example, I have a resume and I have a bio, right? So you do a biography for when you have whether speaking engagements or what have you. I have about 4 different bios, and each bio is focused on where I need it to go. So it's tailored for the audience. So that's what you need to do for your resume. Tailor that for the audience, because if you're going at it like a general job, then you will continue to get a general job. Country or jurisdiction, and get used to some of the vernacular, but that's coming in. I'm giving away a little bit of point 3, but you have to know what the issues are. Now, what does that mean in real life? That means that you need to actually know where to find the information. Things like national risk assessment reports are critical. They are long documents that set out the nature of the industry, the areas of exposure. And by the way, your national risk assessment reports can give you indicators for areas that may need work in the very near future if they're recently written. So look at those documents to not only understand what are the key compliance issues and requirements, but it may signal potential job opportunities. What are the areas of highest risk? the National Risk Assessment Report will tell you that. What are some of the areas that have heightened risks in your jurisdictions? For example, the BVI is an incorporation center. So trust and corporate services providers attract a high risk around the world, but because that is the focus, the majority of business in the BVI, that is one of the areas that tends to need more focus on compliance. You also should look to and subscribe if the authority has a subscription element to their newsletters and publications, but subscribe and get guidance and key releases, press releases from key authorities. So, who are key authorities? Those are your regulatory authorities, your financial services commissions, your financial conduct authority, your central bank, your financial intelligence unit, your sanctions compliance authority. You could have a securities commission. You can have an insurance and pensions commission. So, in different jurisdictions, those key authorities have different names. And if you are working in certain jurisdictions, there may be more opportunities in one sector or another. Also, it's important for you to follow like FATF publications, read their publications. FATF is the international standard setter for anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, and counter-proliferation financing standards. So they are going to give you the tea leaves in terms of what may be topical for compliance work, one of which is financial inclusion. And so I might be saying financial inclusion, and you're like, what? I thought everyone was included. Nuh-uh. So it's one of those areas that you could follow for their publications to make sure that you have some of the knowledge about some of the compliance issues. Because once you polish the resume, you kind of need to know what you're talking about to get in the door. And I mean, read it. I don't mean to get an AI summarized viewpoint. That is one of the little danger points that people hamstring themselves on. Read to understand and comprehend the issues. So every day, if and people make their resolutions and what have you, I am giving you a task. This is not even a resolution, this is a task. Go and read a document, and it doesn't have to be the entire document, but read 10 pages of something in compliance so that you start to get that knowledge base built out. Third is to understand the fundamentals. So, what are the core fundamentals for compliance? Compliance is very technical, and beyond the acronyms, and there are a lot of acronyms, there are concepts that you need to know and understand to get in the door and to level up. So you'll hear things like AML, CFT, CPF, STR, VASP. Like what? Like, are you still speaking English? And there are so many more, and that is just a start. And some industries are jargon heavy. I find that financial services regulation and compliance is beyond. I have been in the space for almost quarter of a century, and I am still seeing terms that I'm like, what does that mean? Holding up my hand. So don't be embarrassed if you don't know the terms. That's first of all. But take the time to understand fundamentals on the actual thing, because you will see KYC as know your customer. I have a bit of a pet peeve about know your customer, because and that is Americanized approach to compliance, that they just shorten something and it's catchy and it catches on, but people don't understand what it actually means in applied compliance. So understand the fundamentals of due diligence. Why are you doing it? What is it? Not what you are collecting. That, oh, I know my customer. That is such a misnomer that leads people down wrong paths. Well, I've been banking with this organization for 20 years. Why do they need updated know your customer information on me? And this is part of what causes the confusion. So there are terms that are out there that have become very common that actually erode the fundamentals. Risk assessments is another one, is another area, and how it is applied, transaction monitoring, and more. And when you know the fundamentals, you can help target what area of compliance you are going to get into the door on. And Here's a little insight for you that I have noticed over the years. There are persons who are in very senior roles, very, very senior roles in compliance and around compliance and having responsibility for the compliance function, directors, and they don't have these fundamentals down pat. So this is not to shame them. It is just to highlight the fact that the space is always evolving. And sometimes if you don't get a good foundation, it is difficult for you to build on top of that. So it's risk-based supervision is a big one because risk assessments, risk-based supervision, risk-based approach wasn't the norm about a decade ago, and so it's still being bedded down. So it's still relatively early to get into this space, and so all of those things I've been involved in as a regulator, as a teacher, as a facilitator, as a troubleshooter, as a creator within a regulatory authority and outside of it, and as somebody who helps empower compliance professionals to figure things out. Now, if you've been at any of my lives in the past, I've said three, but you would know that I like to give bonuses. So, the bonus for persons who are wanting to get in the door is to join LinkedIn. Join LinkedIn groups. um, People have Facebook, Instagram, they have their account for TikTok, they Snapchatting and everything else, and then on LinkedIn the moths and the crickets just there. And then what I see is that people will be like, I'm gonna get a LinkedIn page and look for jobs. No, because everybody sees that for what it is. Join LinkedIn, join some of the LinkedIn groups, attend their free webinars on LinkedIn, and you get to connect with professionals in compliance and financial investigations areas, so adjacent areas, law enforcement, FIUs, FATF is posting on a very regular basis under the Mexican president. But you should also consider cleaning up your social media presence. So I mentioned your Instagram account. Does it scream professional? And you can have a life of pleasure and all of that. And I can speak very confidently to this particular topic because I had my own experience before things used to go viral, with something I posted on a social media platform, that there were people who tried their very best to get me fired from my job. So go back and look at your Instagram, Meta, Facebook, whatever the profile is, and see whether it needs cleaning up and whether you need to privatize some of your content. Because it's not only the US government that's going to be looking at your social media profile. And I say that because, if you're not a US citizen, it's one of the things for your ESTA application and now visa applications where they look at your social media profile. So employers have been long looking at your social media profiles, and if it's a public something, you might think you're fencing it off. Everything is out there on the internet. So clean that up. And on LinkedIn, if you do go on LinkedIn, it is a no-no for you to jump in on those AI summarized compliance tidbits. There's so many now that are popping up wanting to look so thoughtful, and there's certain AI markers to content that will let you know that that is not original thought at all. And just like there's technology to create the content, there's technology to detect whether this person was just half-assing it. So it does you no favors, and people will look at that and kind of like, nah. Also on LinkedIn, there's a banner that says, quote, open to work. Don't use it. Don't use it. People who are looking for people to work do not like to see that. It actually is a deterrent. It makes you look desperate. And so you don't want to wait to create your LinkedIn profile until you're going to job hunt. And don't just ghost on LinkedIn. React. You can look at something. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. React, repost, and you can comment if it's somebody like somebody gets a job posting and what's not, you can say congratulations, and it gets you noticed because you never know who's watching. And there's a nice feature on LinkedIn, depending on what level you're at. You can see that somebody's viewed your profile, or you can see exactly who's viewed your profile. So people are always looking. And if it is that, you as you get more comfortable on the platform, that in itself can create opportunities for you. I also get DMs on LinkedIn asking me if I know of anyone who is interested in a job in compliance in different jurisdictions, because it's not just the BVI. So it's something for you to definitely consider. Now, hey, I see Anguilla is in the room. All right. I said it earlier. If you, depending on where you're watching from, you are happy to say where you're watching from, so you could put that in the chat. The engagement definitely helps, and yeah. So I will move on to the next. So now that we've covered those that are looking to get in the door, what happens if you are now on the ground floor of compliance, and you have gotten a job, compliance assistant, compliance administrator, KYC analyst? There's so many different job titles. That's almost a bit scary as well. But what I would say to you, if you're doing a job, pick a focus, get good at it, then pick another. And what it means is that you need to very carefully tailor how you're going to go after the other, because you may be doing one job, say sanctions monitoring, but you want to actually get into sanctions compliance. It is possibly a good little segue for you to move into sanctions compliance, for you to start doing the reading before you actually try to offer something, or go to your supervisor. It gives you an opportunity to really learn the space in depth, and it tends to be aspects of compliance that are hotter than others. So the opportunity may come up, like sanctions compliance, and I picked that deliberately because sanctions compliance, there were like new sanctions issued every 5 years or so, until 9/11. And then after that, you had sanctions being issued on a very regular basis. And so then it got ridiculous with the conflict in Ukraine, Russia. You had sanctions being issued daily, and I don't mean one or two. Like, I remember delivering a presentation on sanctions compliance in 2023, and in the midst of delivering the presentation, I there was a comfort break. I checked my phone. There was an notification coming in from HM Treasury of the UK that said 73 new sanctions had been issued that morning, and I was like, well, hell, this is a very live case. And so I was able to share that with the group I was engaging with the training. And so it was a very real example of all hands on deck being necessary. I will also share something with you that other somebody else has said. Well, actually more than one person has said to me, people will pay for the things that are difficult. So if somebody's good at doing something that is difficult, I even forgot to put on my ring light. I'm here looking at it now. People are willing to pay if you are willing to do something that is difficult. The things that people run away from, you should be running to. And so some firms want certain things, and it's difficult to keep persons in a particular space. But what I'm finding too is that there's a need to help persons navigate as they learn. And so, a tiny bit of a plug is incoming for Ignis Solutions, but you have to help build out areas of a farm, and it may seem like, oh, thankless work, but I can tell you sometimes that thankless work can be very quickly leveraged to amazing opportunities. So learn the different facets and ensure that you keep reading and understanding the different subjects and articles as it relates to compliance. Second is to get your certifications, and be discerning. Right now, and if you know me, there are two major organizations that have compliance degrees and certifications. Sorry, the compliance diplomas and certifications. Some of them are affiliated with universities. And if you know me for the last 100 years, I lean more towards ICA, the International Compliance Association of the United Kingdom, over ACAMS, which is US based. Now, because ACAMS is very US focused, it has, great popularity in that space. So if you're applying for a job in the US markets, they would recognize ACAMS over ICA, but that's not the reason behind my preference. And there are others out there, but those two are the ones that are more relevant. But beyond the diplomas, it's almost like getting your driver's license. You get your driver's license, you know the basics of driving, but then when you hit the road, real life hits you, and so it's now time for applied compliance. So once you get your certifications, education does not stop there. You could also work on getting short micro trainings, and get your CPD credits. And that is a shameless plug for Ignis Solutions Limited, because Ignis courses will now have CPD credits for 2026. And I am excited about that particular development. So there's going to be the first set of courses coming out in February. I'm taking January off to just, recalibrate. But it's an exciting development, but not the announcement for tonight. So just an FYI. So I've gone through the first two, and so of course there's a third to be considered in relation to you're on the bottom rung of the ladder. You want to elevate. How do you elevate? One of the things that I find professionals are weaker at, and this is even to senior persons, is that they are not comfortable on or are unable to comment on regulatory reform. Some of you may not get a direct opportunity to do that within your firm. And this is something you can do when, say, the regulator comes out with draft laws, right? So they're changing regulation, and this is happening now at breakneck speed. And that's a different situation and a different set of advice that I've given to persons, non-binding advice. But the opportunities exist. So see whether you can contribute through an association or another group if you can't contribute directly through your firm. And yes, it is extra work, but it shows that you're wanting to level up. And you can, if your jurisdiction is a little behind the wheel, you can actually comment outside of your jurisdiction. There are many countries that allow anonymized comments to draft laws. One, for example, is I think Australia. I know Australia had some draft stuff at the end of 2024 that I had made some quiet little comments on, and I didn't publish. You don't have to publish it. You don't have to put it out there, but it is a place to start. And what does that do to really help your career? Well, it applies to critical thinking, and you're looking forward looking in terms of how some sort of draft regulation is going to impact applied compliance. And that is the thing that, from my former regulatory hat, used to really be vexing, because regulators often are not the persons who do the work. So they're drafting the laws to 9 times out of 10 either address a risk or meet international standards. But if they have not actually done the thing, right? So I'm drafting this bill to say when you go out and fish, you need to fish and do this, and this. And these are the things that are required for you to fish legally. And you, as the fisherman, read it and say, well, you're saying that for me to cast my line, I need to tie a rock to the end of the line by the hook. I can't catch any fish. So in terms of applied fishing, the law that has been drafted makes no sense, or would significantly reduce the effectiveness of fishing. The same thing happens with regulatory reform. There are often times that a regulator will have a piece of law, draft law, that says, right, instead of using a hook, use a rock to catch a fish. And then when it's passed, the industry kicks up and says that the regulator is out of touch, but nobody said anything. So it's one of the areas that is an opportunity to show thought leadership. And I think that it is really underused, especially in the Caribbean jurisdictions. We sit back and it's like, oh, well, I'm going to do what I want. And then it's like, you don't read it. And like you had the opportunity 99 times out of 100. regulators want to know. And there are times when regulators are pushed, but if there's a need for more time to ventilate a particular topic, push back, push back. I am of a view, and I've said it in many forums, that there needs to be proper time frames to, as we say, ventilate an issue, and especially when it's a material regulatory reform. So there is that. So I've done three for those on the entry level. So it's time for the bonus tip. So if you're already in compliance and you have a very pragmatic view about your career, there's one thing that you need to do throughout your entire career, whether you're in compliance or getting into compliance or in any other sector, is document your impact. I have a saying, if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. And that particular saying has held so firm. The thing is that professionals in compliance are really good at documenting on their job, documenting the compliance issue, documenting their views to the board, but then not documenting for themselves. Make sure that you have your notes on what you have contributed to the firm, to the association, to your own thought leadership. Have your own compendium of notes and other professional goals that you've achieved. What are the compliance KPIs that you've positively impacted? Have you detected, more of this than was expected of you? Have you done transaction monitoring plus 20% of sanctions compliance screening? And it is important, so important, for you to document your compliance journey as you go along. Hi, Barbados. It's really important for you to document that as you go along, because I can tell you, documenting has saved me, and I've seen documenting save so many compliance professionals out there in the real world. And this now another plan. I have the 2026 Digital Compliance Planner on my website. The link is in the description. If you don't use a planner, use something. It's not just about selling my planner. I think the planner is great in terms of helping you organize your personal professional strategy, particularly if you are in compliance. It is not just for AML compliance or just for regulatory compliance. It actually can be used for things other than compliance, but it is something that I think is really, really useful. So at this particular point in time, I'm coming up to the special announcement, but I would love it if you would, if you haven't already, I have a lot of likes, but like the video. I see people commenting, and if you're watching this after the live, still comment. I do check comments. I've been a little delinquent, but I've been really good on the comments over the last year. So even though I wasn't posting as much, people were still looking at some of my more popular videos, and they were commenting, and I was replying to the comments. So some of those people, I mean, like literally, some of those people in the comments were saying, I just got a job as a compliance, this, that, and the next. What can I do to do this? Or what can I do to do that? Those, like, from around the world, and, India and UK and different parts of the Caribbean. So the announcement now is leaning into exactly that. And so for the announcement, I need to do a little bit of a backstory on Ignis. The word Ignis is Latin for to ignite. And I settled on that word because there were times in my career that I felt like I had been lit on fire, and in a good way, ignited. I have what I realized over my career was a passion for compliance. I was actually ridiculed for it, and that made me even more pissed and driven, because it's like, wait, what? Steve Jobs said is people who are passionate are the ones who are crazy enough to change the world. When people are passionate, they're the ones that get the impossible done. What are you doing? What are you talking about? I have a passion for compliance. This is not a problem. And so I double down and triple down into it. The Phoenix, because I have been in so many situations where people felt like, well, that's it for her career. Just sign out to Simone. And I rose above it. The Phoenix, because it is the evolved form of a Scorpio, did not know that until 2006. And so that is something, and there are people who actually only know me by that call name, so clearly they're not in the regulatory community. But and a friend from primary school who called me that even before 2006. And it went from a vast array of experiences, being an FATF trained assessor thrown in on the deep end of a country assessment, to waking up one morning and the BBC is covering this company with these leaked documents. And the biggest operation happened to be in the BVI. That was Panama Papers. And there's so many different situations that lit me on fire. Some of them I thought the fire would really consume me and there would be nothing left. But some of that actually fueled me, and it forced me to evolve and rise again. And so, 2025 was all about transformation. And in others, I've seen the same fire. I've settled on the name Ignis. I incorporated the company in 2021. I had a mission, a vision. I still have the mission and the vision to empower compliance professionals. And compliance professionals does not mean compliance officers only. It's directors, it's compliance curious, it's all the people in the spectrum. But I see that same fire in other people, and sometimes there isn't a mechanism to help them ignite it. And so the announcement tonight is the launch of a new tier of my membership. Naming it Ignition was easy. People are looking for their start in compliance now more than ever, and there is a huge need for it. And so we are launching, and I say we because I have a awesome support person, but she's like a one-woman team. She's like, yeah, she's amazing. And shout out to her if she's on the live. She should be. We're launching a brand new tier of my membership, Chasing Compliance. Now, yes, that is a membership. Yes, that has been quietly going on in the background since November 2021. I launched it, and there's the first YouTube live is still on the channel. I launched it with the full intention of going gangbusters the January, but unfortunately on New Year's Day, my father passed in 2022, and everything just fell off a cliff, and life changed. And I was ready to shut down the membership. And the members I had who are still there in the founders tier, and that founders price is not going to be offered. And this is now for seasoned compliance professionals. They told me, you are not shutting it down. We are going to be here when you get back. And, that was humbling. It was inspiring. It was like, these people really have this faith in me. And so it's like, I've had the life. So it's awesome. And Chasing Compliance members get everything the Ignition tier gets. But Ignition, let's talk about you. Ignition is where your compliance journey starts, and you gain your confidence. Your confidence gets ignited. A lot of people are uncertain in terms of what to do. And what it provides is a chance for you to be a part of something from day one. So there are limited spaces for. It's going to be $29.99, but I'm offering it tonight for $19.99, and it's a limited number at that price. So it is awesome. You get discounts on all of the courses. And other Ignis products. So I have checklists in there. I have to update some stuff, but they'll have the discounts to that. They're twice monthly lives, and this has to be behind a paywall because there are things that I can't say on YouTube. There might be one thing that I said on YouTube today in terms of an event that I know tends to get the algorithm isn't happy about. And if you know, you get priority access to certain thoughts on certain things. You get direct access to me. So you don't have to wait for me to see something, a random question on YouTube that everybody and their mother sees. And you probably get more, but let's build it together. And so the first cohort will shape the way for everyone after. The persons who join after, so you've seen this live, you didn't get in the link, there's the other link in there, and you jump in on that. You will have access to everything that happened from before. The first session is going to be in a couple of days. So once you join, the alerts go out to you and everything else, and you'll be able to see the lives. And if you are not there for the lives, there will be a recording on the platform. And who is it good for? Again, if you're changing your career and exploring compliance, if you're a new hire in the compliance role, if you're a recent graduate, or anyone in the field who is wanting to grow, it's definitely something for you. I think that it's really like an awesome time. If you miss that, there's also an annual one, also limited spaces, an annual subscription. So you could buy in for the whole year and you would get a discount on the $29.99. So the cheaper one is the $19.99. But if you miss that, you can get in on the annual subscription, limited spaces for that as well, and jump in on that fence. I am here, and I know that people might be shy and they might be just here to support. And I'm thanking all of you for the support. You could share this live with persons after the fact. I have no problem with that, but I'm definitely looking forward to continuing the discussion. So if you know somebody who would have found this particular live helpful, feel free to share this with them. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you on the other side. Make sure you comment. Don't be too shy. And I don't know if there's anything else I need to add. Is there anything else I need to add other than I got curtains since the last live? There's it's just been amazing. I've been doing my courses, leaning into that and getting great reviews for the courses. And as I said, not in this announcement, but I've announced that the courses will have CPD credits. So I'm stoked about that. And there's some new courses that are coming out. So we are going to have an interesting time in 2026. I am so glad to just be here. It's already started to be an amazing year. So anything else? Any questions? Anything for me? Any burning compliance questions? Like what salary you should get? That's going to be in the membership. What salary you should negotiate? Yeah, that's a big one. One of the things I can add that one of the things that I've realized is that compliance professionals are not necessarily paid very well, and especially in the Caribbean region. And it's unfortunate. I will share this. So I was looking at a job prior to retiring. I was looking at, exploring whether I should look for a job in another place or whatever the case may be, spread my wings. And it was going to be in a crypto focused area. And the starting salary for that job that apparently I was a little overqualified for. And I think the whole working out the work permit equivalence and thing would have been difficult. That starting salary was $250,000 US plus allowances and everything else. And that wasn't the equivalent of a chief compliance officer job. That was a director level job in compliance, in an area of compliance for a large company, and sent it in, sometimes you have to see how much are you worth. But it opened my eyes to see, like, okay, you get the first set of discussions, and here it is that somebody is willing to pay you $250,000, and there is nobody that I am aware of within the Caribbean region that's working in a TradFi, so traditional financial services firm, or DNFBP, like a trust company, who's making $250,000 as head of compliance. And that role was not the head of compliance. So the head of compliance for that company probably makes something closer to $400,000 per annum. And a lot of people don't see compliance as adding value because they feel like it's taking away business from them. But the quantum of enforcement actions is going to increase. So that's a discussion that's also going to flip on its table. And we're going to see a lot of news stories in relation to that. So it's the salary element is a big one for compliance. And even for people who are starting out, like what do you ask for? So again, behind the paywall, let's get into the membership and let's have that discussion. And it'll be a network because like I said again, I have firms from around the world that ask me if I know somebody who's looking for a job in this particular area for compliance. They need this resource. It might be a temporary gig, it might be a remote gig. And one of the difficult things in terms of looking for a job in compliance is that sometimes you don't know whether this is something to jump out on. So there is that. So it's a nice little community, a membership. You learn, you get some advice, you avoid some career suicidal moves. I've seen compliance professionals make some moves that has resulted in their career suicide. So it's important. I think it's useful. So I look forward to seeing you all on the other side. I want to thank everyone for joining me. And I think I should do this next week. What do you think? Yes, no, reactions, thumbs up, something in the chat. Give me a yes in the chat if you think I should do another live next week. Everybody's so quiet. All right, I see one yes. I see another big yes. Any other yeses? Maybe I talk about what can I? Well, no, I always have something to talk about. That's not the issue. All right, so we'll do one live next week, and I'll figure out what that is. And I thank everyone for being on tonight, and looking forward to continuing the discussions with everyone next week. Bye, guys.